There are two words that are on every hockey fan's minds right now, and those words are the playoffs. The Stanley Cup playoffs are 2 weeks away, and there is a lot to talk about. Welcome back to another edition of Penn State Sports Night. I'm Jacob Charis, and alongside me is Tim Rogers and Josh Bartosik. So, outside of a couple teams still fighting for the playoffs, for a playoff spot like the Predators and the Stars, there's a lot of teams that are, this is potentially their year. Josh, I'm going to start with you. Who's your top Stanley Cup contender?
I mean, for me right now, it's the Colorado Avalanche. This team in the last 3 straight years has lost in the conference semifinals. They've just been so close but so far. And a lot of people have said that, this is their year for one specifically. They've got 8 guys on their roster with 50 or more points. One of those guys being Mikko Rantanen. He's got 91 and 73. And normally we talk about guys like Nathan MacKinnon and Gabe Landeskog who come out and do that. And so for Colorado, it's always been this year. They bolstered up at the trade deadline guys like Josh Manson. He was a huge acquisition. That blue line is just going to get better and better with guys like Cale Makar and Sam Girard and Devon Toews just having a remarkable season. Sorry, Tim, I know that you're an Islanders fan, but the main issue for Colorado that's been the issue for years now, specifically when they started making the playoffs a couple years ago, has been injuries. They were super injured in the bubble against Dallas. They were super injured against San Jose, and they were injured again last year against Vegas. So if they can stay healthy, they have probably a really solid shot at making the Stanley Cup Finals, or at least the Western Conference Finals. But injuries and being healthy is absolutely the main issue that I have with the Colorado Avalanche right now.
Look, there's no question that there are 2 teams right now that are under the most pressure, and Colorado is one of them. I get the narrative about health, and that's always a question mark, but that's for every team. You know what I mean? And when it comes to Colorado, last year was supposed to be their year. So I'm kind of a little tired of the narrative that, this year's their year. We've heard it for how many years now? So I'll take it to another team, though, who is their year, and that's the Florida Panthers. Now, you want to talk about the best team in the NHL right now, it is the Florida Panthers. There is no question about that. They lead the NHL with 120 points and a plus 100 goal differential. When do you see that in the NHL anymore? You don't, and you don't see it ever, really. So they got guys like Jonathan Huberdeau, Alexander Barkov, and by the way, they got Claude Giroux, who's a perennial playoff performer at times that the Flyers do actually make the playoffs, but look, I can't talk much. My Islanders aren't there either right now. So the question, though, for me when it comes to Florida is 2 big things: goaltending and physicality. Look, Bobrovsky, when he got that contract, it actually wasn't a bad contract because the way that he played for Columbus, he earned it. He did earn it. I mean, we talk about that time when they swept Tampa Bay in the first round and then took Boston to 6 games. That was a very large part. Obviously, Artemi Panarin, Zach Werenski, those guys, but that was a huge part to Bobrovsky. That's not the same Bobrovsky we're seeing anymore. I think he's starting to maybe play a little bit better right now, but not to that contract at all. So that's a huge question mark for me. It seems like he will be the starter when it comes to playoff time, but he also lost his starting job last year in the playoffs. So that could easily happen again. And physicality. Jacob, me and you don't agree a lot. Like let's be honest here. But I got to agree with you on this one. They don't have much physicality up front. And I think, look, they're going to put, as of right now, they're playing Washington round 1. Jacob, I'm sorry, Washington's going to get absolutely dismantled. There is no question about that.
I'm agreeing with you there.
But after that, you got teams like Boston, teams like Tampa, teams like Pittsburgh who are perennial playoff performers. I don't think Florida gets past them.
Yeah. One thing I do want to talk about Florida is, so you mentioned Columbus. It's kind of like that 2019 Tampa team where they could play, they could score a lot of goals, they have the offense, but also they don't have that toughness, right, to win in the playoffs. That's what Florida really needs to really take it to the next level. And that's why I'm not really sold on them. So let's move on from the contenders to, teams that aren't really going to, maybe do well in the playoffs. So, Tim, I'm going to take it to you. Who's your favorite?
Look, you guys know me pretty well. We've talked about this a bunch off the show. It's the Calgary Flames. Look, you want to talk about one of the worst playoff teams besides the Toronto Maple Leafs, I don't even have to mention them, and that's why they're not mentioned, because they don't deserve to be mentioned. But this team hasn't made it past the second round since they won the Stanley Cup, or went to the Stanley Cup Finals in 2004. What are you doing? I mean, how many times have they been the number 1 seed? I just got embarrassed. That picture right there was when they were number 1 seed against Colorado. They lost in 5 games? Are you kidding me? So they're known to not perform in the playoffs and when it comes to playoff time. When you look at it, though, Jacob Markstrom right now I think should be a Vezina finalist. I think it should be him, Shesterkin, and Ilya Sorokin. Yes, I'm going to put my Islanders guy on there. But look, he's leading the NHL in shutouts with 9 right now. But what it comes down to me is what will their stars be? What Johnny Gaudreau will we be seeing in the playoffs? What Matthew Tkachuk will we be seeing in the playoffs? Both of them have 100 points right now. And when Calgary first made their first playoff one with Johnny Gaudreau, he had 7 points in 10 games, which is very impressive. In that series, 1 point in 5 games. And when they got swept, 2 points, no goals. That's not, when he's your star, he's your franchise right now, he's got to perform in the playoffs, and he hasn't before. So if you're buying the stock on the Calgary Flames, I'm sorry to tell you, you're going to lose your money.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty safe to say. We agree on that a lot. We agree on a lot of things, specifically the Calgary Flames. They are finally playing up to their potential, but until they win a playoff series, I really don't want to hear them in the conversation. I'm going to go back to the Eastern Conference and the Metro. I'm going to go with the New York Rangers, and I know that that's a lot of people that won't necessarily agree with that. Yes, this team is exciting, and they score a lot of goals. You got guys like Adam Fox, Artemi Panarin. But they have always had one of the worst defensive systems and blue lines known to man. It's probably one of the main reasons that the King never won a cup in the Big Apple, and it still haunts me to this day. I was never a big Rangers guy, but you always want to see those future Hall of Famers win a cup, and he just never did it. And so really the Rangers, for me, their only top defenseman that's good on both sides of the ice is Adam Fox, former Canes legend, by the way, Adams Fox. But other than that, I mean, Jacob Trouba was all right, but that contract is not great, and he's really not great in the defensive end. And Igor Shesterkin has been playing out of his mind this year. But you have to wonder if he gets burned out. This team reminds me so much of the 2016-2017 Edmonton Oilers that ran Cam Talbot into the ground, and he got burned out in the second round of the playoffs and was never the same again. Now, Cam Talbot played 73 games in that year. Igor Shesterkin has only played about 57 or 58 this season, so he's not at that level. However, he's been doing a lot of the heavy lifting on the defensive side. I think if they end up matching up right now, they're slated to play probably either Pittsburgh or Washington. I'm going to go back to the Washington. They might beat Washington, but when it comes to Pittsburgh's kind of got a better defensive system, and they have guys that have been in the playoffs longer. So I know that a lot of people think this is an exciting team, but until they get help on the blue line, they're not going anywhere.
Yeah, well, with the Rangers, really, yes, they give up the least goals per game, but they also give up a lot of high-danger chances. I believe they're well above the league average in that category. So, you know what, and also about the Flames, I like them this year. I like the addition of Tyler Toffoli. I think Markstrom will help, obviously, a lot. And also, they have guys like Mangiapane, Lindholm, who's, both of them are having a good year. So they have the depth scoring that I think has been missing, really, in these past couple of years. But it's all about the star players for really any team that's in the playoffs. So I want to talk about teams that, maybe are not talked about enough, but maybe have a legitimate shot at maybe, thrilling some fans.
Yeah, well, you mentioned thrilling. I have to talk about Kirill the Thrill and the Minnesota Wild. No one's talking about them. They're kind of, overshadowed by just how great the Colorado Avalanche are, who we mentioned earlier in this segment. But Kirill Kaprizov's got over 100 points this season. I think he's at around a 103. He's playing out of his mind. He's just so fun to watch. Kevin Fiala is probably one of the hottest players in the league right now, if not the hottest. He's been burning opponents worse than I'm burned right now from the past weekend. And that offseason, the trade deadline acquisition of Marc-Andre Fleury, you get a guy who is a known Stanley Cup winner and is a known playoff performer. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, we talked about Cam Talbot. Cam Talbot's their backup now. He doesn't have to have a whole lot of workload now. He can take games off, and you can put Marc-Andre Fleury in there. And so this team right now, to me, is so exciting. They play such a fast game of hockey. I'm gonna throw this out. It's a hot take. I would not be surprised if Minnesota makes it farther than Colorado. I could see Minnesota in the Western Conference Finals this year.
Wow. I mean, look, when you look at the top three in that division in Colorado, Minnesota, and St. Louis, I could see any of those three, honestly, representing the West. Those teams are so good right now, and that compliment that you just gave Kevin Fiala about how he's hotter than you're burnt, that's a big compliment for him right now, so I'll give him credit there as well. But a team that I'm looking at is also in the West, and that's the LA Kings. And you guys know, I talk about this team a lot, and there's a good reason for it, is because when you go into playoff time and when you're building a team, the Kings are in a rebuild right now. There's no debating that. But they have the perfect balance of veterans and youth, and that is so rare and so hard to find, especially when it comes to playoff time. They have known Stanley Cup winners like Dustin Brown, a former captain who's won the Cup twice, Jonathan Quick, who's an Olympic gold medalist and as well as Stanley Cup winner, and Anze Kopitar, who's their captain and their leader, and another great two-way forward. And how about the youth? Adrian Kempe, 34 goals on the season. Alex Iafallo, another great young contributor for this team. But there's two key pieces that I want to talk about for this LA Kings team, and that's Philip Deneau and Victor Arvidsson. They got these guys in the offseason, Arvidsson via trade and Deneau via the offseason. Philip Deneau has, I think, around 50 points right now, but he is one of the best two-way forwards in the league. I wouldn't be surprised if he's a Selke finalist, at least in the running, in a conversation, because he absolutely deserves it. And Victor Arvidsson is another guy who, yes, he only has 48 points right now, but that's 65 games that he's only played. So, and again, these guys have been there and have been in the league, been in the playoffs. Philip Deneau just coming off a Stanley Cup final run. Victor Arvidsson's been there for Nashville for how many years and have been a key contributor in the playoffs for them. Look, we all know I don't like the Edmonton Oilers when it comes to playoff time. I don't think you do. I don't think you do. So I don't trust them. And if they do play the Calgary Flames, boy, am I licking my chops if I'm the LA Kings right now, because I think they would absolutely dismantle them because they have the grit, they have the veterans. And look, Calgary is known for not being able to perform in the playoffs. So do I think the Kings could get past maybe Minnesota, St. Louis, or Colorado? Not really. But I think they could give them a run for their money, and they absolutely deserve to be talked about right now.
Yeah, both those teams, the Kings and the Wild, are obviously great picks by you guys. I'm going to say the St. Louis Blues. Robert Thomas, Jordan Kyrou, both guys that are having breakout seasons, along with Justin Falk on the back end, who's having a bounce-back year. Maybe not in terms of points, but he's a steady defenseman. So I don't think they're being talked about. It's really unfortunate that the Blues and the Wild are playing in the first round against each other because both these teams have the potential to go deep. So that's going to do it for this edition of Penn State Sports Night. For Tim Rogers and Josh Bartosik, I'm Jacob Charis, and enjoy the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Hey everybody, thank you for tuning into this edition of Penn State Sports Night. We hope you liked that segment.
And we're sure there's other Penn State Sports Night segments that you are going to love as well. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content.
And check us out on social media for updates and behind-the-scenes clips and pics. Follow us on Twitter at PSSNTV and on Instagram at PSU Sports Night to keep up with all the action.
For all of us here at the Belisari Media Center, we are
Penn State Sports Night.